So welcome to week 5 of Mpai 600 here at Georgetown University. Announcements, paper briefings due next week, July 30th, and I'll give you a lot more guidance here, but again, that's a week from today, a week from tomorrow, a week from yesterday, depending when you're watching this. And again, due at 11:59 p.m. I'm available this week. Please text me, call me, email me if you have any questions or issues, but I don't want an email on Sunday saying I can't do the paper. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to give you guidance now, internalize the guidance, and then start thinking about your paper as soon as possible and executing later on in the week. So again, we had 2 case studies, Iraq WMD, where we had a whole litany of failures. And again, many of you identified this in your discussion posts. Collection failures, over-reliance on curveball was probably the biggest collection failure. You could also say lack of collection assets in the country, particularly after the inspectors were kicked out, was a failure in collection. A failure in analysis. Again, the aluminum tubes that were thought to be centrifuges, that is an analytical failure. One, there's technical analysis that was just substandard, and then there was also areas of groupthink and confirmation bias that led people to think that those tubes were part of a nuclear enrichment facility. There was also a negative evidence issue. Everyone said they're centrifuges, therefore he wants a nuclear program. The reverse wasn't asked. If he is having a nuclear program, why are we only seeing these centrifuges being imported? So that was, a clear analytical failure. Organizational failure. And you saw in the Rachel Maddow documentary. If George Tenet is the one communicating all the intelligence, it doesn't matter if you have all the red teaming and all the analytical tradecraft standards. If George Tenet says there's WMD in Iraq and he's the one who's briefing the president, then that's it. That's the answer there. Arguably now, we wouldn't have an Iraq WMD because you wouldn't just have one person who dictates all the intelligence. The wars in Ukraine and some of the past wars have shown that what was only the purview of intelligence in 2002, 2003 is now the purview of commercial imagery and private analysts and others that can go about a problem from multiple perspectives. So arguably that wouldn't happen now, but that's, I'll let you decide. And then finally, the policy politicization issues, which the Rachel Maddow documentary goes in depth. I'll let you decide on whether there was political interference that caused this failure. But I will say that it's hard to divorce. I broke down the discussion into intelligence failures and policy failures, but it's really hard to kind of separate the two because without the political impetus to get answers on this, there would be no curveball. At least curveball's analysis or assessment on curveball wouldn't have made to the top levels of the government. There would have been no talk of centrifuge tubes or aluminum tubes. So those are failures that arguably were brought out through the political process. And then the second case study is 9/11. I bring up, was 9/11 an intelligence failure? I argue, again, because of the knowledge of the two people there, it was an intelligence failure. The question is what to do if you get an assessment saying bin Laden determined to attack in the U.S. And I bring up that case study because you can make the argument that says the president's going to come back to you and say, okay, what do you want me to do? And now it's up to you, intel analysts, to say, okay, well, it's a serious enough problem that we need to heighten security on commercial aviation. Invade Afghanistan, although that's not really realistic. Or some other way that can actually mitigate the risk that you just briefed. And then the organizational issues. And again, this is, I think, the crux. You can agree or disagree with me, but an NSA documentary brings this up to to the point, is that there was information collected by the National Security Agency. There was information collected by by other branches of our government, but it wasn't shared to the civil aviation people or the FBI or someone that could actually do something about this. That means that the right information sharing protocols weren't there, that this person wasn't talking to this person who could actually make an actual decision. And then as you go through this, where along the chain could federal state government have prevented 9/11? Where were there information sharing issues? Where were there other problems that might have been a little bit more effective? Okay, so I want to shift to the paper 2 topics. Again, guidance for paper 2. And again, you have strategic papers. So you can focus on the case studies, or I'll allow you to choose an issue, whether it's politicization or confirmation bias, and show how that issue weaves through multiple case studies. So again, either way, focus on a case study or focus on an issue. Just some of the issues and case studies we talked about. Failures in collection. And let me back up. I do not want a laundry list. I do not want a laundry list. I do not want a laundry list. I'm giving you examples here to focus on. Don't just give me, here's 15 reasons why 9/11 happened or 10 reasons why Iraq WMD happened. Focus on what you think were the primary failure and back it up with evidence. So again, failures in collection. Pearl Harbor, we did not know where the location of the Japanese aircraft carriers. Yom Kippur War, there was an over-reliance on Narwan as a human source. And Iraq WMD, we just talked about curveball in depth. Failures in analysis. Again, Pearl Harbor, you can make the argument about racism and really underestimating the Japanese, and that led to the failure to anticipate their potential attack on December 7th. You talk about the confessions, and we went in detail about that, whether it was confirmation bias and how those 4 soldiers or sailors were railroaded, or negative evidence, or vividness bias. And then Iraq WMD, you could talk about groupthink, you could talk about the other failures of analysis that I just talked about a second ago. Politicization, again, Iraq WMD, we talked about that a second ago. The confessions is another case where there was pressure to get a conviction, and that led to poor analytical standards being implemented. And then 9/11, we just talked about the interface between the policymaker and the intelligence community, and that might have broken down and led to the 9/11 tragedy. And then finally, organization. Again, 9/11, I just talked about that in the NSA documentary. Pearl Harbor, as we talked about a few weeks ago, there was information collected at the federal level, but it wasn't shared with the commanders on the ground. That's a failure in organization. And then the fusion centers, which you saw about that, talked about that in one of the videos. Arguably, again, information is being collected at the national level, but the fusion centers are supposed to push data down to state and local officials, or at least push data down and bring data back up. Is that happening? Why do we still have these attacks? That's something you can explore in your paper. So, unfortunately, again, because we are in a compressed schedule, we go right into the next module, so no breaks. And it's the counterterrorism case studies. So 4 case studies: Fort Hood, the underwear bomber, Boston, and the European Union. And the readings, the Fort Hood shooting and the Boston Marathon, you'll see the readings in the module 5. And then the documentary, 2 documentaries, excellent documentaries, Christmas Day Bomber and the EU terrorism. And the question as you're going through this is, why do we still have these failures? And I also just want to emphasize that this is separate. I'm not looking for you to do your paper on this week. I'm looking for the paper to be focused on the first 4 weeks. So again, if there's questions or issues, let me know. And again, I look forward to what your discussions and your presentations and papers next week.